Hello Assassins, this is Gargudon for the ones who came before, and welcome. 10 years ago today, Assassin's Creed Syndicate was released, taking us on the most modern and technologically advanced assassin adventure yet, set during the dawn of the Industrial Revolution at the height of Victorian London. The game brought us some of the best gameplay mechanics to that day, an array of new gadgets and weapons, one of the most vibrant and lively worlds to date, packed with a wide variety of activities to keep you entertained for hours. Perhaps most notably, this game also marked the end of an era for the franchise, being the last game to follow what could now be considered the classic AC formula, as well as being the final game after 6 years of annual installments since Assassin's Creed 2 in 2009. It might also be safe to say a lot was hanging on this game, coming off of the infamous and disastrous launch of Assassin's Creed Unity only a year earlier. For the final game before the franchise would go on a needed 2-year hiatus, it definitely went out in style, offering some of the most fun gameplay to date, all to critical acclaim and more. Welcome to this 10th anniversary special in-depth exploration of how Assassin's Creed Syndicate was the grand end of an era. Let's dive into it. First off, let's have a look at the game's narrative backbone. A big new and revolutionary aspect of this game was of course the introduction of fully playable dual protagonists that you could switch between at almost any time. A trend that was slowly picking up in gaming, famously properly having been introduced in Grand Theft Auto 5. In the player's control were Assassin's twins Jacob and Evie Fry, and this made for a fresh and dynamic playing experience, each character having their strengths and unique set of exclusive skills, each suited for special combat or stealth situations. Perhaps most famously, Evie's ability to stand so still, she essentially becomes invisible to the enemy.
I've mastered the ability of standing so incredibly still that I've become invisible to the eye.
Looking at the game's story itself, while it may not have been the most groundbreaking, deep, or emotionally charged narrative in the series, it was still a really decent one, with interesting protagonists who would develop throughout, and whose dynamic would also evolve for better or worse. The core of the story is the Assassin twins' relationship as siblings, coming off of the recent passing of their father, and how the liberation of London, the approach to that, and their disagreements that come with affects just that. When we are first introduced to them in the beginning of the game, each about to go after separate Templar targets in Croydon, south of London, we see a brother and sister who seem so fond of and to love each other, who can laugh, be silly, and somewhat irresponsible together. This slowly changes as soon as they arrive in London, Evie suddenly taking on the role as the mature and formal one, and her brother being more brash and rebellious. Evie suggests taking it slow, looking for and finding the Shroud of Eden rumored to be hiding in the city before the enemy, while Jacob just wants to get things done, forming a gang and taking control of the streets. Throughout most of the game, Evie takes her time investigating clues as to where the Isu artifact might be, while Jacob brashly and very directly crosses Templars off the list, not thinking much of what it could lead to. And that's just the thing. Almost every Templar target is vital to the city's infrastructure, sitting in positions of power and influence in everything from transport, medicine, the economy, politics, and more, to the point where he almost single-handedly destroys the UK economy. Jacob is just eliminating targets, and Evie is left to clean up its mess, understandably growing tired of her brother. This leads to the two ready to part ways towards the end of the game, but not before having eliminated their final target, Grandmaster Crawford Sterrick. As things turn out, his defeat sees the two bonding again, and that childhood-like friendship is resurrected, almost as if the great curse of coming to London would be their siblinghood and love for each other being tested. Speaking of Grandmaster Sterrick, this game of course also comes with its share of antagonists and side characters. While it could have been much worse, it is probably safe to say Sterrick is one of the more underdeveloped primary antagonists of the franchise, never really getting to know much of his background, instead mostly getting the impression he's evil for the sake of it. But maybe that is supposed to be his primary trait after all. The way he proudly says to Jacob during their final fight how he is exploiting the Shroud, as well as how he puts a bullet through the head of an assistant merely for disturbing his piano playing session. As Sterrick's right-hand woman and second in command is Lucy Thorne, who like Evie studies Isu artifacts and is eager to also get her hands on the Shroud. The two kind of find a nemesis in each other, their investigations into its whereabouts often leading them to clash with one another, resulting in a showdown. Thorne eventually meeting her fate at the Tower of London. The game's strong side characters lies in the roster of our protagonist associates. Probably most notably Jaya Deep Mir, more commonly known as Henry Green, the Master Assassin of London. Henry plays a decent role throughout the main story, helping the twins to get settled in London and assisting Evie in her search for the Shroud, as the two go developing romantic feelings for each other. More associated with Jacob is Police Sergeant Frederick Aberline, who seems to have some of the same brash, goofy, manly traits as Jacob, making for a fun dynamic between the two. The London story side missions also introduces an array of famous historical figures who end up becoming associates of the twins, from legendary author Charles Dickens, the man behind the theory of evolution Charles Darwin, to Her Majesty Queen Victoria and more. Overall, the game delivered a well-paced 9-sequence story of ideal length, filled with fun and action-packed missions. Almost every new memory came with its fun challenges and took the player somewhere new, from Croydon factories to the many corners and secret vaults of the city. The black box assassination missions from Unity famously also returned, making eliminating core targets all the more fun and creative, allowing the player to do it in more ways than one and however one fancied. As mentioned briefly, this game brought us one of the most vibrant, lively, fun and activity-packed open worlds in the series. While the 7 London boroughs explored in game each certainly felt different and brought each theirs to the table, there was an undeniable life, ambience and brightness to the world, also compared to previous ones, whether you were walking the slums of Whitechapel, the industrial sites of Southwark, or the posh streets of Westminster. Sometimes just walking through the streets watching kids play, the green of St. James's Park listening to street performers playing patriotic tunes, or climbing to the top of Houses of Parliament, watching the chimney and black smoke filled, or a beautiful city from above, with beautiful cinematic music playing in the background, was sometimes the best part of exploring the open world. In addition to the main story, of course, the game also brought such a wide array of open world activities to participate in, from classic collectibles, horse-carriage street races, underground fight clubs, London story side missions, train and boat cargo hijackings, conquering the boroughs in the form of liberating gang strongholds, bounty hunts and so much more, all of which made for such a great variety in gameplay that would keep you coming back and entertained for a long time. Another fun and interesting part of the world was of course the World War I segment that almost felt like an entirely separate minigame of sorts within the main game, accessible through a helix portal on the eastern end of the Thames River. Going through this portal, players would take control of an unknown yet familiar looking young woman, Lydia Fry, who it would turn out is the granddaughter of Jacob. This segment, signified by its beautiful and cinematic locked sunset, made for an array of fun bonus gameplay, allowed players to freely explore the Tower of London, and introduced another legendary historical face, the one and only Winston Churchill. Albeit not on the scale of Unity, or with the same freedom, the game brought back the same character customization system more or less. You had a primary weapon in the form of brass knuckles, a compact kukri, or a keen sword, a revolver firearm, a number of cool original and legacy outfits to choose from, some of which could also be dyed to preference, and of course also a number of classic and new lethal gadgets in and on your belt and assassin gauntlet. Introduced were voltaic bombs, emitting sparks, briefly shocking and paralyzing enemies, allowing you to easily deliver the killing strike. Most notably introduced though was of course the rope launcher. Suddenly you could scale massive buildings in mere seconds, and quickly and smoothly zipline across rooftops and buildings, almost never having to touch the ground. One aspect where the development team more or less kind of trolled us in the marketing campaign was creative director Marc-Alexis Gauthier's word that modern day would properly return in this game, kinda like Unity, only for it to be about 10 minutes total worth of cutscenes. The lack of a just playable modern day, be it first or third person, was of course disappointing, but for what it's worth, the story told across these 10 minutes was actually quite intriguing. We saw a number of familiar faces like Sean, Rebecca and Otso Berg, and we also got to see Galina Voronina's on-screen debut. Across these cutscenes we see everything from minor encounters between mentioned assassins and Templars, video journal entries from Sean and more, all colliding in an all-out battle at the vault of the Shroud of Eden underneath Buckingham Palace, resulting in Berg and company escaping with the artifact and leaving us players kinda shocked and scared, and injured Rebecca Crane lying in Sean's arms. The game ends with a cutscene with the shroud being delivered to Dr. Alvaro Gramatica at his Abstergo lab, where among other things these odd and eerie tube chambers with creatures that look to be some sort of cloning experiment can be found. Suddenly a familiar voice appears, eerily speaking of her imminent return. That of course is the voice of Juno. All is made for a pretty interesting ending with multiple major setups, making players think that when actual playable third-person modern day hopefully returned in whenever the next game would be, we would be in for one hell of a modern day story. As things turn out though, this storyline ended up just being concluded in a comic book, which feels like a major missed opportunity, but for what it is, even if it was just cutscenes, Syndicate overall had an interesting and intriguing modern day storyline. Last but not least, we of course also need to talk about the game's primary story DLC, the Jack the Ripper expansion released in December 2015. Personally speaking, this is by far the best and my absolute favorite Assassin's Creed story DLC. Set 20 years after the main game, playing as a visibly older, yet wiser, just as agile, and even more lethal Evie Fry, the DLC uses the real story of Jack the Ripper, an unidentified serial killer who terrorized Whitechapel in the autumn of 1888, brutally murdering 5 ladies of the night as its backbone. The game cleverly ties this to the Fry twins, Jack being a fallen former apprentice of Jacob's, now being back for his revenge. The DLC brilliantly also uses elements that feel like something straight out of a David Fincher thriller. The opening alone, playing as Jack hunting down Jacob in the dark night, resulting in a daring showdown between the two in Jacob's apartment, is one of the absolute highlights of the DLC that is safe to say left me, and likely many others, quite simply shocked. What just happened? What did Jack do to Jacob? Is he dead? What happens now? Then the screen cuts to daytime, the title is shown, accompanied by a dark, haunting piano theme, all while you're still processing what you just saw, not being sure of anything. It off the top of the bat throws you straight into the action, creates an insane cliffhanger, setting the tone for the story, eager to uncover what happened to your brother, if he's even still alive. Over the course of the next 9 memories, Evie does everything in her power to do this and find and stop the notorious killer, taking everywhere from the slums of Whitechapel, eerie deserted prison islands, to Lambeth Asylum and more. Select memories in between, we automatically once again switch back to Jack, eerily seeing things from his perspective, causing utter mayhem. Another thing this DLC does brilliantly is paint the London map in an entirely different picture. In the main game, as mentioned, lively, vibrant, and overall full of good vibes. Here it's mostly cloudy, gloomy, snowing, and overall just has this darker feeling to it, even when the sun partially is out. Another thing that adds to this brilliantly is the fact that only a fraction of the map is explorable. Gone are the lavish streets of Westminster and the Strand, and here you are confined to just Whitechapel and City of London, its streets and air haunted by the actions of the Ripper. From a gameplay perspective, another cool new aspect of the DLC was the addition of new weapons and fighting techniques. Evie took home with her from India, in the form of spikes, fear bombs, and brutal takedowns, plus corresponding fear mechanics. Mentioned bombs would make the sound of a terrifying scream, sending enemies into a frenzy, essentially making them harmless. Enemies witnessing someone being spiked and or brutally taken down having the same effect. Overall, Jack the Ripper was a fresh breath of air for Assassin's Creed story DLCs, each memory feeling long, essential, and well thought out, especially compared to some previous expansions. It cranked narrative and depth of up to 11, perfectly incorporated elements of thriller, creating daunting cliffhangers, and brilliantly painted the vibrant London setting we'd all gotten so used to and fond of in a completely different and eerie way. In conclusion, and to wrap things up, for the end of an era of the franchise and the final installment before it would go on a 2-year hiatus, it went out in style and with a bang. AC Syndicate delivered one of the most lively, vibrant, and activity-packed worlds the series has seen even to this date, all strengthened by some of the best and smoothest gameplay mechanics to date. Another landmark aspect, the game successfully introduced dual protagonists that brilliantly served as the backbone for its super decent, well-paced story. Here a decade later, while Syndicate may or may not necessarily be the most talked about installment amongst fans, nor the game to really have left its mark on pop culture and gaming history, compared to Assassin's Creed 2 and Black Flag, it is widely still considered a great game, has mostly always been met with praise from fans and critics, and is still considered a fan favorite among many, even to this day, a number of players still only experiencing it for the first time. The legacy of Assassin's Creed Syndicate is kept well alive and lives on. And that sums it up for this special anniversary deep dive into how Assassin's Creed Syndicate was the near perfect grand end of an era. What do you think about the game? Do you agree with the things said in this video? What did it do right? And what could it have done better? Let us know in the comments and let's get the discussion going. Make sure to also like and subscribe and follow the ones who came before, one of the leading Assassin's Creed fan communities, on our socials for more content on everything AC. With that, I have been Gargudon for the ones who came before. Stay safe and active, Assassins. Till next time.